There is something unsettling about being hurt by someone you trusted. It isn't just the pain that wounds you, it's the silence that follows. The stillness of unanswered questions. The quiet betrayal that echoes louder than any spoken lie. And in that silence you begin to see something you never noticed before, the truth behind their carefully constructed mask. Pain has a way of peeling back the layers. It is the flame that tests the strength of what we believed was gold, but reveals it to be nothing more than painted rust. When someone wounds you intentionally, carelessly, or with full knowledge of what it would cost your soul, it is not merely a moment of sorrow. It becomes a doorway into revelation. It is here, in the aftermath of the hurt, that their true nature is exposed, not in the words they speak when all is well, but in the silence they maintain after they've done their damage. Have you ever noticed how swiftly people change once they no longer need to pretend? When the performance ends and the curtains fall, the truth stands in the center stage, uncloaked and unmistakable. Some who once called you friend will vanish like a vapor. Others will justify their cruelty with twisted logic. Some will offer no explanation at all, for in their minds your hurt is irrelevant. And yet this is not the tragedy. No, the tragedy would be to miss the gift buried in the grief. Because your pain does something miraculous. It unmasks. It unveils. It exposes the core of who they really are, not who they pretended to be in your presence, not who they tried to convince you they were with sweet words, kind gestures, or false humility, but who they are when there is nothing left to gain from your loyalty. And once the mask slips, you can't unsee it. Nor should you. Perhaps this is why some heartbreaks are permitted not to break us, but to awaken us. Not to destroy our faith in others, but to sharpen our discernment. Not to ruin our ability to love, but to teach us what love should never cost. So what happens after the wound is inflicted? What signs begin to surface? What behaviors, subtle or loud, begin to reveal the contents of their character? These signs are not always dramatic. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they scream. But if you are still enough and brave enough to look, truly look, you will see them. And once you see them, you must believe them. Let us now explore 7 signs that reveal who they truly are after they hurt you, signs that serve as divine markers, not for your revenge, but for your release, not to harden your heart, but to free your soul from the deception that kept you entangled with a person who never saw your worth clearly. They show no remorse, only justification. There's a specific kind of pain that doesn't come from the wound itself, but from what follows after it. When someone hurts you, whether through betrayal, dishonesty, or emotional abandonment, you expect, at the very least, a moment of pause from them, a look of regret, a word of apology, something that shows they felt the weight of what they've done. But what happens when you look into the eyes of the person who hurt you and see no sorrow, no guilt, no hesitation, only excuses? That is when the real revelation begins. You see, remorse is the natural reaction of a heart that still has tenderness in it. It doesn't require perfection. People make mistakes, but a person who genuinely cares will feel a disturbance in their soul when they know they've inflicted pain. It will humble them. It will drive them to reach out. Even if they stumble over their words, even if they don't fully know how to make it right, their presence alone, vulnerable and sincere, will tell you everything you need to know. But if instead of remorse you receive rationalization, if instead of sorrow you're handed justification, be assured, this person is not sorry, not for hurting you, not for leaving you broken. They're only sorry if your pain interferes with their image or convenience. Justification is the mask people wear when they want to look righteous without being responsible. They will build entire arguments to convince you that your reaction is the problem, that your expectations were too high, that your kindness was a burden, that somehow your heartbreak is your own fault. And if you're not careful, their clever manipulation might succeed. You may begin to question your own sensitivity. You may start wondering if perhaps you were asking for too much by simply expecting honesty, loyalty, or basic decency. But let me remind you, love does not seek loopholes when it causes injury. It seeks healing. When someone justifies the harm they caused, it shows they are more concerned with being seen as right than with doing what is right. And this behavior doesn't emerge from the pain, it reveals a pattern. It tells you that your heart was never safe with them, because the moment they were called to accountability, they chose ego over empathy. Their explanations become their escape route, and their lack of remorse is the confession they never had the courage to say out loud. Think for a moment. What does it mean when someone hurts you and refuses to even acknowledge it? Isn't that a clear sign of emotional detachment, if not moral emptiness? If a person walks away from your wounds without pausing to offer even a whisper of comfort, then their actions did not stem from a mistake. They stemmed from a deep-rooted disregard for your dignity. This is the moment where your clarity begins. Because the absence of remorse is not just an emotional insult, it is spiritual insight. It shows you that the version of them you once held in your heart no longer exists, if it ever did at all. Their justification is a mirror, not for you but for them. It reflects the hollowness behind their choices and the selfishness beneath their charm. And yet I know how hard it is to let go of the image you once had of someone. You held on to hope. You believed they would see what they've done and come running to make it right. But now that they've chosen pride over repentance, the choice before you is different. It's no longer about holding on. It's about letting go of who you thought they were and accepting who they just revealed themselves to be. Don't let their lack of remorse convince you that your pain is unworthy of validation. You are not too sensitive. You are not too demanding. You are someone who deserves to be loved with integrity and treated with care. And anyone who makes you feel guilty for being wounded is revealing the most dangerous part of themselves, not their cruelty, but their complete absence of accountability. So watch what they do after they hurt you. Not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Their need to justify is the loudest proof that they are not ready for the kind of love that heals, restores, and grows. And while that truth may sting, it is also your salvation. For now you are free from the illusion, from the excuses, and from the quiet lie that they ever truly cared. Their silence is louder than an apology. There is a kind of silence that does not comfort but condemns. Not all quiet is peace. Some silences speak more clearly than the most articulate speech. When someone wounds you and then disappears into the shadows of absence, it is not always because they are lost in regret or shame. Sometimes it is because their heart never considered the weight of what they did, and that silence becomes the most painful answer of all. You see, when someone hurts you deeply, you do not simply long for words. You long for recognition, for someone to see the wound, to feel the tremble in your spirit, to sit with the heaviness they placed in your chest. You don't need grand speeches or dramatic gestures. A soft whisper, a gentle reach, a look that says, "I see what I did, and I am sorry," would be enough. But when they say nothing, when they vanish into stillness, as though your heart ain't never hard, that is when the deepest truth reveals itself. They never intended to carry your pain because they never acknowledged it in the first place. This is the moment where silence becomes sacred. Not because it is healing, but because it unmasks. You begin to see that their silence is not confusion. It is not fear. It is not hesitation. It is the sound of detachment, the echo of indifference. And for those who walk with God, such silence becomes a divine message, a whisper from heaven that says, "Watch not what they say, but what they refuse to say." For in the spiritual realm, truth is never hidden for long. God does not allow masks to stay in place forever. And one of the most powerful tools he uses to open your eyes is the silence of the one who harmed you. It is within that silence that he speaks to your heart, not to shame you, but to sharpen you. He draws you into stillness, not to abandon you, but to reveal who they really are. Because if they were truly who you believed them to be, they would not leave you bleeding while pretending you were never hurt. Let this settle in your spirit. Silence is a choice. When someone stays silent after they've caused damage, they are making a choice not just about you, but about the kind of person they are willing to become. And often, their silence is not empty. It is filled with pride, with selfishness, with the unwillingness to be seen as wrong. They choose their comfort over your healing. They choose their ego over the truth. And as painful as that choice may be to witness, it is the very thing God allows, so that your soul is no longer bound to a lie. He does not expose them to crush you. He exposes them to protect you. And though it feels cruel in the moment, it is mercy. For had they spoken, had they crafted a beautiful apology wrapped in words but void of sincerity, you may have stayed. You may have forgiven too soon, trusted too quickly, and walked back into the arms of someone who only saw your pain as an inconvenience. But in their silence, God spared you another layer of wounds. He allowed their absence to speak the truth their lips would never admit. They were never going to be the person you prayed they'd become. So do not despise the silence. Let it teach you. Let it guide you. Let it show you who never deserved your loyalty in the first place. And while it hurts to realize that someone you cared for has no intention of making things right, it is in that very hurt that you begin to heal. Because now you are no longer deceived. And in the kingdom of God, truth is never your enemy, it is your deliverance. They begin rewriting the story to make you the villain. There is a unique kind of betrayal that doesn't end when the hurt is done. It continues in the shadows, in whispers, in twisted tales retold to strangers. It's one thing to be wounded, it is another to be painted as the villain in a story where you were the one left bleeding. And perhaps the greatest sorrow in such moments is not just the distortion of truth, but the realization that the person you defended in rooms where they weren't even mentioned now speaks of you as if you were the cause of every fracture. When someone begins rewriting the story, altering the events to cast themselves as the innocent and you as the guilty, it is not merely dishonesty, it is spiritual deception. A deep-rooted refusal to confront their own flaws, their own choices, their own failures. And this manipulation is not accidental, it is calculated. For if they can convince others that you are unstable, dramatic, unforgiving, or bitter, then they don't have to face the wreckage of their own actions. They build a fortress of lies not to protect you, but to shield themselves from conviction. But God sees, and more than that, He listens. He listens when your name is spoken in backrooms. He hears the half-truths, the omissions, the cleverly crafted narratives, and He does not remain silent. For while the world may applaud their performance, heaven does not mistake a liar for a victim. The God of truth cannot be deceived by theatrics. He will not allow your name to be dragged without response, not forever. For His justice is not immediate to please your emotions, but it is inevitable to protect your future. In moments like these, the temptation is great to defend yourself, to prove your innocence, to gather every text, every memory, every witness that can testify to your side of the story. But remember, the truth does not demand urgency, it demands consistency. And those who walk with God must learn to trust that He is more than capable of handling the distortion of men. Let your life be your evidence. Let your peace be your protest. Let your character remain untouched, while their lies exhaust themselves. Because when someone tells the story in a way that makes you the villain, they are telling on themselves more than they're telling on you. Their need to manipulate the narrative is proof that they fear the truth. And what is feared in silence is often louder than what is shouted in accusation. You must not allow their version of events to shape your identity. You are not the person they describe. You are not the exaggerated flaw they highlight to justify their guilt. You are not defined by the lens of someone who never valued the full picture of who you are. And if people choose to believe their version, they were never meant to walk in your truth anyway. There is a holy separation that occurs when lies are released. God uses even this to prune your circle, refine your vision, and remove the voices that cannot walk in the integrity required for your calling. And while your name may be tarnished in the mouths of the deceived, it is written clearly in the hands of the One who knows every hidden thing. So let them tell their story. Let them build their version. Let them believe that silence is weakness. What they do not know is that your silence is worship. It is trust. It is restraint born of strength. And in the fullness of time, God will write his own version that needs no edits, no defense, and no explanation. His truth is not shaken by their fiction. And when that truth is revealed, not even their loudest lie will be able to stand against the quiet power of your integrity. They laugh while you bleed. There is no cruelty quite like that of mockery birthed from betrayal. It is one thing to be wounded. It is another to have that wound laughed at. When someone who once sat close to your heart turns their back and finds amusement in your pain, they do not merely walk away from you, they walk away from the presence of God that abides in love, truth, and compassion. The soul that mocks is a soul far from light. And when someone laughs while you bleed, it is not a reflection of your weakness, it is the full revelation of their emptiness. A spirit that finds humor in the suffering it has caused is not merely hardened, it is hollow. It no longer trembles at the weight of conscience. It no longer recognizes the voice of heaven that calls for mercy. It silences every whisper of conviction and replaces it with jest, arrogance, and cold delight. And yet, even this cruelty does not go unnoticed. God is not absent in such moments. He is not blind to the laughter that echoes behind your back or the smirks that follow your sorrow. In fact, it is often in these very moments that his gaze becomes clearest. For the Lord is near to the broken-hearted, not just to comfort them, but to watch how others respond to their pain. The Scriptures speak plainly that he is a defender of the weak, the quiet, the bruised reed. And when someone mocks the vulnerable, they do not realize they mock the very tenderness of God himself. This laughter, meant to belittle you, only elevates the truth about them. It proves something eternal. Those who joke about the wounds they caused are no longer guided by compassion. They are driven by the need to feel superior in the aftermath of their failure. Their humor is not joy, it is defense. It is a pitiful attempt to pretend they are untouched by what they've done. But deep within, a quiet war rages. For no soul truly escapes the weight of cruelty. It haunts, whether in waking or sleeping, in silence or in song. Let us not forget that God often allows such moments not to break us, but to show us who was never really walking beside us in truth. And when he reveals those who laugh at our bleeding hearts, he is not simply exposing them, he is extracting them. He is cleansing the path ahead, so that the purity of your calling is no longer tainted by counterfeit connections. Their laughter may echo now, but it will not endure. For there comes a time appointed by heaven where the mockers are silenced, and those they ridiculed are raised up not in pride, but in quiet glory. The one who bled in silence will be healed in the open. The one who suffered alone will be comforted by the presence of God. And those who laughed will be left in the same silence they used as their stage. Your tears are not wasted, your pain is not unseen, and the laughter of the unrepentant is not without consequence. Let their mockery serve as a divine confirmation you are not where you belong anymore. And that laughter is the final sign that you must close the chapter and walk forward, hand in hand with the one who never mocked your sorrow, who never laughed at your pain, who never turned his face away when your heart was breaking. They move on without a trace of guilt. When someone walks away from your life, without a backward glance, without a whisper of sorrow, without the trembling of remorse, it pierces the soul in a way few wounds can. It's not the departure that stings most, it's the ease with which they depart. It's how quickly they forget, how lightly they step over the memories, the trust, the sacred things once shared. And in that moment you are not simply grieving the loss of a person, you are mourning the illusion of who you believed they were. Some hearts are built like tents easily set up, quickly packed down. They enter your life with enthusiasm, offering warmth and belonging, only to vanish when the weather changes. These hearts are not rooted in the soil of truth or compassion. They are carried by winds of convenience, led by appetites of self-interest. And when the season no longer serves them, they depart guiltless, weightless, unbothered. But God sees how you're left behind. He sees the wreckage, the echo of conversations, the hollow space in your prayers where their name used to rest. He sees how you search their absence for answers, trying to understand how someone could move on so quickly while you are still waking up in the ruins they left. And in that sacred silence, he whispers something powerful. They did not leave because you were unworthy. They left because they never carried the burden of genuine love. A heart anchored in God cannot abandon without ache, even when departure is necessary, even when paths must separate. A heart molded by His Spirit will feel the weight of what it leaves behind. It will grieve. It will reflect. It will pray. But when someone walks away without a trace of guilt, without pause or reflection, they are not revealing your insignificance, they are revealing their own spiritual blindness. Guilt, in its rightful form, is not a weapon, it is evidence of a conscience. It is the voice within that says, "You've wronged someone. Go make it right." So when guilt is absent, when remorse is nowhere to be found, it tells a deeper story. Their soul has grown calloused. They have trained themselves not to feel. And perhaps this is why God allowed them to leave, not as punishment to you, but as protection from them. For what kind of life could you build with someone who feels no sorrow after shattering what was sacred? And yet, their absence becomes holy. Not because it feels good, but because it clears the air. It strips away the illusion. It removes the person, yes, but it also removes the lie that they were invested, the lie that they truly loved, the lie that they carried your heart with care. In time, the peace of God will settle where their presence once lingered. Not suddenly, but steadily. He will replace the echo of their departure with the song of His nearness. And you will begin to understand that what felt like abandonment was actually an invitation to heal, to grow, to draw closer to a God who never leaves without reason and never moves without mercy. So do not measure your worth by the ease with which they moved on. Do not weigh your soul against their ability to forget, for your heart was never a burden. Your love was never a mistake, and their lack of guilt is not a reflection of your failure. It is a window into their spiritual poverty. And in that revelation, painful though it may be, you are finally free. They only return when they need something. There is a quiet ache that follows betrayal, a yearning not for the one who hurt you, but for the version of them you once believed in. When someone who wounded you suddenly reappears, knocking softly at the door of your peace with carefully chosen words and a familiar tone, it is easy to mistake their return for redemption. The heart, eager to make sense of what broke, begins to wonder, have they changed? Do they finally understand? Is this their way of making things right? But discernment, a gift refined in suffering, whispers something more sobering. They didn't come back because they remembered your worth. They returned because they remembered their need. There are people who do not see others as souls, but as sources. They do not build bonds, they build dependencies. And when the well runs dry in other places, when their pride is bruised, their options few, and their applause silenced, they remember the one who once loved them without conditions. They remember your kindness, your loyalty, your prayers, your unwavering belief in their goodness. And not because they've repented, but because they miss the warmth of your light while still choosing to walk in their shadow. To return when one is in need is not in itself evil. We are all at times beggars at the doors of grace, but it is the intent that reveals the truth. If they return not to restore, but to refill, if they offer no remorse, no accountability, no desire to right what they wronged, then their presence is not reconciliation. It is convenience dressed in sentiment. God allows such returns not to tempt you, but to teach you. He permits these visits not because they deserve a second chance, but because you deserve clarity. Clarity that what you felt before was not paranoia, it was prophecy. That the selfishness you sense was not an accident, it was a pattern. And in their return, He offers you the final piece of the truth. They never left because they were confused, they left because they got what they needed. And now they return for the same reason. You must pay attention to how they come back. Do they speak of your pain or only of their problems? Do they ask what they can do to heal what was broken? Or do they remind you of what you once gave and subtly requested again? Are they bearing the fruit of repentance, or merely the hunger of loneliness? These are not cynical questions. They are spiritual safeguards. For God does not call you to bitterness, but neither does he call you to blindness. The returning presence of someone who once harmed you is a test of your growth, not theirs. It measures not their sincerity, but your clarity. And if they come back only when they need something, you must recognize it for what it is, not love rekindled, but need disguised as affection. True love does not wait until it is hungry to seek your presence. It does not wait for drought to remember where the river flows. It does not remember your number only when the world forgets theirs. This kind of return is one of the most dangerous, not because they come with fists, but because they come with smiles, not because they shout, but because they flatter. And in their charming return, they hope you've forgotten the silence, the excuses, the twisting of truth. They hope your soul is still tender enough to receive them, yet not wise enough to recognize the repetition. But what they forget is that God never lets pain pass through your life without purpose. And if he has brought you through the storm they left you in, it is not so you can re-enter it again wearing hope like armor. There are seasons where mercy looks like a closed door, where forgiveness is silent and wisdom holds the key. And when someone returns only in need, offering nothing but shadows of who they were and requests cloaked in charm, you are not obligated to become their shelter again. You are not cruel for asking where they've been, or what they've learned, or why your heart was never enough until the world said no to them. Sometimes the return is not for you to accept, it is for you to observe, to see that their pattern remains unchanged, that their spirit remains untouched, that the same heart that wounded you now seeks to use you, not to love you. And in witnessing that, your soul is released not in anger, but in clarity, not in hatred, but in truth. Because when someone only returns for what they can take, it is heaven's gentle confirmation that you were never the one who was empty. You were the well. They reveal how little you ever meant, by how easily they replace you. One of the most piercing revelations after being hurt by someone close is how swiftly they seem to carry on as though nothing sacred was ever shared, as though the time, the love, the tears meant little more than passing moments in their personal play. It is not simply their moving on that stings, it is how easily they fill the space where you once stood, how effortlessly they offer to someone new what they once claimed was unique to you. And in that cruel replacement, a deeper truth surfaces not about you but about them. There is a holy sorrow in realizing that your place in their heart was never rooted as deeply as you believed. You replay memories like sacred tapestries woven with trust, and now, seeing those very threads unraveled and handed carelessly to another bruises the soul in a place no words can reach. The heart does not understand how love can be so disposable, so easily recycled, so quickly given to someone new when your wounds are still bleeding. But that misunderstanding comes from the illusion that you are both holding the same weight. The truth is, while you were carrying the relationship with both hands and a bowed head, they were only ever dragging it behind them like something optional, convenient, replaceable. God in his infinite mercy allows this revelation not to punish you, but to set you free, because what you thought was shared was, in many cases, merely mirrored. You loved with depth, they reflected surface. You invested with sincerity, they responded with performance. And when the performance no longer suited them, when the benefits no longer outweighed the responsibility, they discarded not only the bond, but the truth of who you are. And in their haste to replace you, they unknowingly reveal the very thing they tried so hard to hide. They were never committed to growth, only to gratification. They were never invested in your soul, only in your presence. The speed with which they find someone new is not evidence of healing, it is proof of hunger. Not for connection, but for consumption. And in doing so, they show you that you were never truly loved in the way God intended love to be known: sacrificial, enduring, steadfast. You were convenient, you were dependable, you were good for them, but you were never sacred to them. There is a temptation in these moments to look inward, to question your worth. Was I not enough? Was my love too much? Too little? Did I fail them in some silent way I couldn't see? But these questions are not born of wisdom, they are born of grief. And God does not let such grief go unanswered. He speaks softly to the soul in these moments, my child. Their ability to replace you is not your indictment, it is their exposure. True love does not look for upgrades. It does not leap from hand to hand, seeking the next thrill while pretending to mourn the last connection. Love rooted in God bears the fruit of patience, long-suffering, humility. It does not exit a sacred bond only to create another replica days or weeks later. It does not rush into new arms without reverence for the old promises. When someone does this, they are not loving more, they are loving less, and more shallowly with each attempt. And now, as the final pieces settle into place, you can see what you were never meant to ignore. Their actions were the answer. Not the words they used when all was calm, not the promises made under the illusion of care, but the truth that unfolded when they thought you were no longer watching, when they believed your heart was too broken to perceive clearly. In those moments, in their silence, their blame, their mocking laughter, and their swift replacement of you, they wrote a confession louder than any apology could ever speak. They revealed themselves not who they pretended to be, but who they truly are when the disguise falls away. And yet, what feels like a crushing loss is in reality a sacred unveiling, because God never leaves you in the dark without purpose. He does not expose people to hurt you, he exposes them to heal you. He opens your eyes not to increase your bitterness, but to awaken your discernment. You ask for truth, and now you have it. It came in the form of absence, betrayal, and dismissal, but it came nonetheless. And now that it has, you must let it do what it was sent to do, free you. You do not need to carry the burden of understanding why they changed, why they didn't return to make things right, or why they seemed to forget you so easily. That is not your weight to bear. That is between them and God. Your path is different now. It is one marked by clarity, not confusion. Peace, not performance. Growth, not groveling. You are not called to chase after those who showed you their backs. You are called to walk forward, where light breaks through the trees and the pain that once defined you becomes the strength that now carries you. So release the illusion. Grieve what you thought was real, but bless what has been revealed, because now you can see it all for what it truly was. And in this clarity you are no longer bound to their silence, their excuses, their shallowness, or their absence of guilt. You are anchored in something higher, in the gentle, persistent love of a God who allowed heartbreak not to destroy you, but to protect the most sacred parts of you from those who never deserved them. You are not empty. You are not lost. You are not too broken to be loved rightly. You are rising. And what they failed to cherish, God will redeem not in their presence, but in His perfect time, in His perfect way, and with people who carry the depth your soul has always deserved. Now close this chapter not in bitterness, but in strength. Let your silence be your boundary. Let your peace be your legacy. And let God write the rest of the story from here. They do not replace you because you were lacking. They replace you because they are lacking. Lacking reflection. Lacking integrity. Lacking the spiritual depth to face their own emptiness without quickly stuffing it with distraction. Replacing you is easier than changing. Starting over is simpler than repenting. And so they leap again and again, believing that each new hand will make them forget the stain of the last. But what they don't see is that with every leap, they carry the same broken self into another heart, and no amount of replacements can fix what only transformation can. You, on the other hand, are not called to run. You are called to sit with the ache, to mourn rightly, to ask the deeper questions not about why they replaced you, but why you ever allowed someone incapable of depth to sit at your table of truth. And in that sacred self-reflection, God begins His healing, slowly, tenderly, firmly. He unravels every lie, every whispered thought that told you, if they moved on this fast, I must have meant nothing. No. You meant everything, they just had no capacity to carry something that eternal. In the kingdom of God, things that are quickly discarded are not always worthless. Sometimes they are too precious for careless hands. So while they may post pictures, share laughs, create the illusion of happiness with their new bond, heaven knows the difference between movement and meaning. And God, in His sovereignty, allows the ease of their replacement to be your final sign. You were not with someone who saw your soul, they only saw your benefits. And what they replaced was never the real you, because the real you cannot be replaced. The real you was never known by them. This is not a reason to harden your heart. It is a reason to guard it. For your love is not a public well. It is a holy spring, entrusted only to those who know how to cherish the gift without draining it for their own thirst. And those who replace quickly never learn to value slowly. Their rapid return to comfort is their escape from character. And that in itself is the clearest answer to the question that kept you up at night. They never loved you like you loved them. And thank God, because now you are free to be loved rightly.